Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the StarCityGames.com Open in Atlanta, part of the SCG Tour. I am Nick Miller alongside Jeff Hoogland. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Nick.
Always good to see you. We got a new standard here, new standard format with Oath of the Gatewatch, of course, but you're playing something a little tried and true.
Yep.
It's been a while since we've had a standard Open you've been at, but you have been crushing standard classics. You did very well at the Open, or the Invitational, with standard and modern with this black-white deck.
Yep.
A lot of people have kind of taken to this. You've got some new cards, but I want to give a spotlight to this black-white control deck that you've pioneered and has looked very good.
All right. Well, at first I'd like to give the tribute to where the original deck came from. Paul Rietzel and Sam Black played a deck that was within 20 cards of this at GP Indy, so that's where the initial inspiration for the deck list came from. I kind of tuned it a little bit more after that. I like control decks like this that are able to one-for-one your opponent a lot, but then also close the game very quickly. That's the thing a lot of control decks often lack. That's why you see like Esper Dragons play Ojutai and things of that nature. And this deck, our finisher is secure the waste into some kind of anthem effect, is able to close the door in a single turn or 2 to 3 turns at most, usually.
Right, we saw Sam Black do that a long time ago with the Bant tokens build, kind of, utilizing that.
The retreat to Marriott, yeah.
Secure at the end, then untap, anthem, kill. And now we've seen a bunch of different tokens builds, branching into blue as well for Esper, that are sort of similar to this, but you've got definitely more of a controlling element to it. You definitely have a Planeswalker package here between Gideon, Sorin, and Ob Nixilis. Really gives you that control package.
And the control element of this deck is what I think makes it more potent than the Esper variations of this deck. The Esper variations tend to play more creatures like Jace and Mentor in the main deck. The only creature we're playing in the main deck is Seeker of the Way, so that means we're more resilient to the red removal like Culligan's Command and Fiery Impulse. And even in post-board games against those types of decks, we're able to board all of the creatures out entirely and still have enough win conditions to close the game while gaining virtual card advantage by blanking those cards in their hands.
Right. Very few targets for removal, and then the targets they do have, they don't feel good targeting them because they're tokens.
Correct.
So you're getting way ahead there. New card, might as well mention that right now. We've got the reprint of Grasp of Darkness here. Very versatile removal spell that you get to play fairly consistency because your deck is only 2 colors.
Yeah, so one of the big changes I made with the new standard format from the old one, the previous iteration of this deck I was playing a bunch of the enchantment removal like Silk Wrap and Stasis Snare, which made you vulnerable to the card Jamoka's Command. With Grasp of Darkness being printed, it's been a long time since we've had this quality, like basically unconditional removal spell. It kills almost everything you care about in the format. So the mana base is skewed more towards black in this configuration as opposed to the one I played at the Invitational. And even though this card misses some things like Siege Rhino and Tasigur, it still allows your tokens to attack into those cards profitably.
Allows you to make some tricks, then get there from there. Of course, read the bones because you're not playing 3 colors, so Painful Truth's not as good here. Also, a thing I noticed and I talked to you about in Las Vegas was your deck, when it scries cards to the bottom of the deck, doesn't really shuffle them back in. So when you get rid of the bad cards, you don't have to worry about drawing them again.
They're gone essentially forever. There's one Dark Petition in the sideboard is the only way we have to shuffle in the entire 75.
Which is interesting in a format right now with the fetch land, battle land, 3 color, 4 color mana bases.
Yep.
2 color, you get to utilize Shambling Vent to its full power, but also Blighted Fin. The card here, we've seen all these lands try to pop up, but this is the only one we've seen really show up in constructed decks.
Yep. Very
good against things like Dragon Lord Ojutai.
Yeah, it's just having less color constraints on your mana base allows us to play more utility lands because all of these 26 lands decks inevitably flood out in the standard format, and whoever has more utility lands when they inevitably flood out tends to be the one that comes out ahead.
Top of that, we mentioned the tokens, but more removal spells here. Ultimate Price, Ruinous Path, Valorous Stance, Utter End, Murderous Cut, and then of course Catch-All Planar Outburst here.
Yep.
Kind of cleans up everything with a bunch of little utility things here. As you mentioned, when you flood out, you have 2 cards that can turn your lands into creatures.
Correct, yeah. So I'm playing more Ruinous Path because this deck's more black than it was before, so we also gain more threats, basically. You awaken these cards a lot. In fact, Planar Outburst is even good at cleaning up Planeswalkers in the late game because you'll often awaken it, clear the board, and then attack their Gideon for 4.
Right, good way to clear out Planeswalker when you need to.
Yep.
Sideboard cards, we have Monastery Mentor in the sideboard, a card a lot of people say should be in main decks. We see it in the Jeskai Black decks. Why is it sitting in the sideboard here? Do you just want to blank the removal game 1?
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to trade down on tempo in game 1 as often as possible against the Jeskai Black decks. Losing your 3 mana threat to their 1 mana spell is inefficient. At least with Seeker, you're only trading 2 mana for 1 mana. Mentor is just there when we really need to close quickly, against Rally and the Ramp decks. We really need to put a clock and then we bring in the extra threat.
Okay, speaking of Rally, A new card here from most of the Gatewatch, Kalidas, Trader of Get here. This card looks like an absolute hoser to the rally strategies, and of course with Anafin's the Foremost being a 3-color card, you don't have access to it in this deck.
Correct.
Now you do, along with Hallowed Moonlight.
Yeah, so Kalidas fills a number of roles in this deck. One of the things he does really well is that, I mentioned I board out the Seekers against the red removal decks. You find yourself lacking for a little bit of lifelink in those matchups at that point, and Kalidas can then come in to fill those roles because he still doesn't die to Fiery Impulse and things of that nature. He also serves to keep things like Jace and Soulfire Grandmaster out of their graveyard, narrowing the ability of their Culligans and Ojutai's commands to be good.
Right, a lot less recursion going on when you can shut down the graveyard there. Discard package here between Duress, Transgress the Mind. What is that coming in against?
Those are primarily for the control matchups. One mistake I think people make when sideboarding with decks like this a lot is I don't bring in any of the discard in the black mid-range mirrors. Transgress looks very good on paper against like the Abzan decks, but their curve is so thick at like the 3 and the 4 slot that even when you take away one of the cards, you're usually not stopping them from playing a card that turn. So you just don't want to be spending mana to not affect the board. And it's a miserable top deck in the late game on top of all that.
Right. Yeah, we've seen that kind of in Modern with the Jund and Abzan decks. Yep. Some of them sliding out the discard spells and mirrors just because there's a glut of cards you can get, but also late game, when you draw it, it just doesn't really do anything.
Correct, yeah.
One thing I want to talk about here, as we were kind of mentioning before, there's a bunch of decks in this format, whether you look at Rally or you look at, the green-red ramp deck, Eldrazi, you can only beat so many decks. You're choosing to just really not have anything here to try to hose the Eldrazi deck.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't think decks like these mid-range and control decks really have the option to hose the ramp deck anymore. You used to be able to play cards like Infinite Obliteration and take out all of their Ulamogs and like really have a chance, but now they have Kozilek and they have Worldbreaker and like they just have such a diverse selection of threats, and they have Kozilek's return to clean up your Monastery Mentor if you're trying to go in that route. Yeah. So really, we're just hoping to dodge or get a little bit lucky in that matchup, and I think that's okay in most constructed formats in Magic right now, is that you're not going to beat everything. It's okay to say, we're just probably not going to win that matchup.
Right. You got good matchups across the board. For the most part, everywhere else, another planar outburst, but here, I really like the Dark Petition in this deck. This card does not get enough love in Standard. We see it all over the place, Vintage, Legacy, being able to do broken things, but just having the option, sort of like Bring to Light, find one of your cards you need.
That's why I actually call it Bring to Black a lot of the time. It brings the black spell out. It's very flexible in this deck. We have Ruinous Path and Read the Bones that it's good with in the main deck. In the more grindy matchups, it can even be a 4th Nixilis for 7 mana, essentially. It gets Kalidas against Rally now for just 1 more mana. Against the red deck, it gets Flaying Tendrils. I've even gotten discard spells with it before when you just really need to check their hand to make sure the coast is clear. It generates 2 Storm for your Monastery Mentor. So you get 2 triggers and make 2 monks with it.
Right.
So it really does a lot.
Right. Seeing all the angles. Well, the deck, great pedigree. You've done very well with it. You're bringing it into a new format here with a couple of new cards, but mostly old favorites. How do you think you're positioned for this weekend?
I think if I play against a lot of the other mid-range and control decks in the format, I'm well positioned to beat those. I also think we have a good aggro matchup, so like most of Magic, if we hit the matchups and play well, we're going to do really well.
All right. Well, we wish you the best of luck here. You're number 1 on the leaderboard here for the SCG Tour Season 1, gunning for that Player of the Year, gunning for the Players' Championship, looking to back get there. So thanks for joining me here on the sideboard. Stay tuned to StarCityGames.com all weekend long for the action here in Atlanta.